Thank you. So what I want to do to you today is I actually want to talk a little bit about a project that I've been involved in, which has been called the Racism at Work project. And just to alleviate anybody's fears, this is not a project that tries to generate racism at work. So basically, it's been pieces of research that have been funded through various non-academic channels, which I've been asked to provide analyses of two of the largest surveys that have been done, analysing and documenting and archiving people's experiences of racism in the workplace. And part of what I want to talk about is how I communicated the findings of those discrete pieces of survey analysis to non-academic audiences. So what I want to talk about is I want to talk about the way, just briefly comment on the impact and social responsibility agendas in the modern university. I want to critically reflect on embracing this from a public sociology perspective. I also wanted to talk about the process of applying for funding, because I don't know if you've talked about that today, and I kind of feel I'm getting wheeled around the university at various points to talk to other people about how to write funding applications, which is a bit of a detour from my day job. Give you an overview of the Racism at Work project, so what we actually did. I want to give you an overview of who we actually engaged with. I want to ask the question, why graphic novels, short films and a poster? I also want to talk about the challenges and opportunities that come from working with non-academic audiences. And then I want to critically reflect on what is impact, how do we define it, and how do we measure it. Okay, so at the University of Manchester, they've got various documents on their website setting out what they call the social responsibility agenda. And as part of the Manchester 2020 strategy, social responsibility is one of key core strategic goals. So this is what the university is, how it kind of promotes itself. And part of that is to make a positive difference to the life and future of our region, the northwest of England, Greater Manchester specifically, by taking socially responsible decisions that have real beneficial, measurable impacts. Remember that word, measurable. Impacts on the people in the world around us. They want to communicate research with impact by making a positive difference to society and addressing the major challenges of the 21st century. Social inequality is a major strand of the university's social responsibility agenda. And another aspect of it is engaging our communities. So this is about locally targeted work in the Greater Manchester area, and basically how we use our knowledge and resources and visitor attractions for the benefit of our communities. One of the things that I'd recommend if you're interested in doing any forms of the kind of creative ways of communicating research that you've heard today, not just my paper but in previous other papers, one of the things that I would suggest is identify what the funding streams of support are. Because in doing this Racism at Work project, I've been able to utilise 4 internally based funding streams at the University of Manchester. And I suppose my key piece of advice for you would be, whether you're in a faculty or a school of humanities, school of social sciences, or whatever faculty you're in, get in contact with your research finance office. Ask them what sorts of money is available and when it's available. Because when I first started this project, I'd never heard of the 4 of those. And I've managed to somehow squeeze every single penny I possibly can and keep going back for more. So find out who your research finance officer is and ask them what potential opportunities are available. So applying for funding, yep, research finance office, tick. Learn the language of the funding streams. Kind of like what Tom Dark was talking about in one of the previous panels, is learn the language that the funding streams like. Copy the language, show that you know what their strategic objectives are. Because basically, like Tom was saying, you want those quick, powerful messages that basically the person reading these application forms probably read about 5 or 6 of them a day easily. You need to stand out. You need to hit the message home clear and concisely. Unashamedly use their terminology, particularly in the call for funding. Don't be ashamed of quoting them word for word or paraphrasing them word for word. I do it all the time, and it just makes it really clear and very obvious who it is you're talking to and why you're talking to them, even though you might not like some of them. As you'll see in a moment, the whole business case agenda, fits into the neoliberal model of the modern university, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that. However, so while you might not agree with the languages and the strategies, you can, for the type of work that you want to do, find a way of working with their ways of thinking about things to do what it is you want to do. And as I say, when you're looking at a call for funding, don't just cite the call for funding, cite the broader strategies, because these funding things are connected, so you're making the connection for them, rather than hoping that the people reading your applications will understand or just assume you know what you're talking. You can't assume that they will know what it is you're trying to get at. So the business case, I'm not a big fan of the business case. Why? Because a lot of it is underpinned by the notion of generating more research funding, profit, acquiring funds that offset the costs of quality research and put the costs elsewhere. The whole privatisation and neoliberalisation of the modern university, I think, is to the detriment of quality research. My motivation for doing this sort of work comes from, during my PhD thesis, a dialogue with public sociology, and in particular the sociologist Michael Burrowoy, and the way in which he talks about public sociology, a participatory, as a response to a lack of participatory democracy inside and outside the university. What he's calling for is a public sociology that argues against the neoliberal model. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to find, he thinks that public sociology should make an investment in the defence of civil society. So civil society being one of the key and important ways in which people organise to defend their rights, their interests, and also to challenge injustice, but also as a way of, as he says, challenging the encroachment of markets and states, challenging those neoliberal orthodox ways of thinking. But primarily, going back to that typically famous phrase of Karl Marx, the point is not to philosophise about the world, the point is to change it. And this is what's kind of underpinning what Burrowoy's talking about, is how do we create change? So what Burrowoy's also talking about is the ways in which the public generally, so we have all these documents and pamphlets about knowledge exchange, about engaging with the community, but in terms of the way we traditionally communicate research, it's behind paywalls and for journal articles, it's behind 100 quid monographs. The vast majority of people are not going to pay for a subscription to a journal for one article and it costs them £30 for a short piece of work. Majority of people don't have the money to pay for a 100 quid monograph. So it's about thinking of the ways that you can work in interaction with civil society, the labour movement, neighbourhood associations, community groups, faith groups, immigrants' rights groups, human rights groups, and engage in a genuine dialogue where the relationship is I don't take my knowledge to them and impose my knowledge on them. It's a process of mutual engagement where you work in collaboration and try to address the power dynamics and the hierarchical relationships that come with that and try and even them out and flatten them out so that you can work in a way that's generally, as Burrowoy calls it, dialogical, but also collaborative. But for me, the other inspiration behind this project comes from the writings of Stuart Hall, and anyone who's familiar with Hall would tell you that two things preoccupied Stuart Hall's social and political thought. The question of what is politics and where does politics happen? And what I was talking about a moment ago about engaging with civil society as a way of engaging with the community, there's a relationship between the institution of the university and civil society, and that relationship's ultimately political. There's a question of power there. And part of the work that I'm particularly interested in is how do we address the fact that the university is a far more powerful institution. It's got far more resources than a neighbourhood association has. But how do we also address social injustice issues within the university, working with civil society organisations within the university? So, for example, trade union groups. So one of the things that when you're engaging in impact work I would always think about is, so where can you make an intervention? Think about who are you trying to reach and why are you trying to reach them? And part of the design for the Racism at Work project came from the analysis we did of the 2015 Race at Work survey 25,000 people took part in that survey, sharing their experiences of racism at work. One of the biggest surveys of its kind ever in this country. And we're also working a slightly smaller survey at the moment. We've got a report due out in a couple of weeks on the Trade Union Congress's Racism at Work survey. And the key thing that when you read the data from those surveys, the quantitative analysis and the answers to open-ended questions, one of the things that you read that hits you straight away is the fact that the workplace is a site where politics takes place every day. And so, but going back to the kind of Burrow part, is the notion of having that dialogical relationship, that relationship of dialogue where we address those social issues with the people who are experiencing them. So what did we do? So how did the project come about? So essentially the project came about when business in the community approached me to do a survey analysis of their 2015 race survey. It was supposed to take 2 months, but I get so engrossed in the survey it took me nearly 7 months. So that, again, there's a lesson to be learned there about being realistic about what you can do in the time frames. What else have I said? Sorry, the writing's so small. Anybody wants the slides, please email me and I'll forward them on. But in order to do the work, we applied for a ESRC, Economic and Social Research Council Impact Accelerator grant to produce short films and graphic novels. And basically what we were doing was, from the Race at Work survey, we were taking the actual words of the people who took part in the survey, using their words and constructing the graphic novels, the films and the poster around the things that those people actually said, so that we could give people in the workplace an idea of where they could find help if they're being confronted by racism at work. And that could be medical help, it could be employee representative help, and stuff like that. But also trying to explain to people what some of the risks are when you speak out in the workplace about racism as an isolated individual, and what are the consequences of that and what are the challenges people are overcoming. But the most important reason for producing these works was to address the idea, based on the survey, that so many people in contemporary society fundamentally do not understand what racism looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like. I don't know if anybody saw Good Morning Britain yesterday morning, and a woman from business in the community was talking about this booklet she'd created about things that you can and cannot say that are offensive. And she was barracked on national television for having the temerity to suggest that many people don't understand how to talk about race and racism at work. And she was accused of making the problem worse. So in highlighting the problem about racism no longer became the problem. The fact the woman was talking about it, that was the problem. So what we also did was we sought further strategic investment from the various funding strands, and then what that led on to was, based on the materials that I brought with me today, please take a copy at the end, that led on to the TUC coming back and asking us to analyse their survey. Right, so let's get on to the good stuff then. So who did we engage with? Well, we engaged with basically 4 different groups. We engaged with the business community through an organisation called Business in the Community. So this ranged from equality and diversity practitioners working in small organisations to large multinational corporations, i.e. Google. We worked with the Trade Union Congress, the largest civil society movement in Britain. On paper, it currently has 5.6 million members across 50 trade unions, one of the biggest, organisations in Britain. Then we worked with people who are doing a lot of educational work, National Union of Students, Show Racism the Red Card, the local research centre at the University of, Central Library in Manchester, the Ahmed Iqbal Ullah Race Relations Resource Centre. And more recently, we're working with a local organisation that works with young people called Reclaim, about how we develop the materials that I brought with me today. How do we develop them into some sort of training package for young people who are basically coming to the age where they're ready to participate in the labour market through paid employment. And then we also worked with broader civil society, such as the Runnymede Trust. I'm flagging this Burrow quote because I think it's really important. I set out on a journey to do something very, very specific, and it ended up nothing like I intended it to be. So I went on a lot of false paths. There was a lot of endless labour. There's a lot, as it says, a lot of turns this way and that, a lot of theories and ideas abandoned, and a lot of data never presented. These are all the kind of unseen labour that we do when we produce these things that never end up in that final glossy product. And I just wanted to flag that because I think I would love to be able to stand here and say I had a great plan and I executed it perfectly from A to B, and it was absolutely nothing like that. There was a lot of mistakes made and there was a lot of twists and turns. So why graphic novels? Kind of like going back to previous presentations you've heard, who has time to read a 50-page plus report or a 100-page report? Who has the money to download academic journal articles, to get behind paywalls? Who has the money to purchase books that cost 100 quid? Again, coming back to those questions, who are we trying to reach? Those traditional academic methods of communication are not going to speak to the people in workplaces around the country that work in call centres, work in shops, work in factories, work in offices. Those are not the ways that we're going to be able to speak to those people. We produced the materials because we wanted, one of the things from presenting the findings of a report was equality and diversity practitioners and race equality officers were telling us that they have a dearth of material that they can use to focus the discussion in the workplace. They needed some different way of sparking communication between workers, highlighting the issues so that they didn't become confrontational issues between one group of workers and another. So we tried to address that. But as I was saying earlier, we were trying to communicate that human experience of what racism is, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like for the people on the receiving end of it. And we wanted it to be educational as well. So what we did was I worked with a fantastic visual artist called Paul Gent. Really incredibly, incredibly nice man. If anybody ever wants to do a graphic novel, I couldn't recommend Paul highly enough. So basically what we did was we took 4 themes from the report that we felt were particularly important. The number of people that still think racist banter is just, it's fine. It's okay, it just washes over you. It doesn't matter, it's insignificant. And we really had to address that to show that the effects that racist jokes have and what the social functions that racist jokes have in terms of structure and power and the whiteness of institutions and what it does. Addressing racism in the workplace, we fund the number of people that took the survey that reported that they had been treated with indifference, their manager did nothing. And basically what we were trying to communicate there is the standards that we should expect of our managers to take a report of racism seriously, to treat it in confidentiality, to address it in a timely manner, and to address it seriously. We were basically saying to managers, supervisors and employers, the Race Relations Act was amended in 1968 to outlaw racial discrimination in employment. You've had 50 years to get your act together, and what you're doing just simply ain't good enough, and we expect better than that. In contemporary consumer society, how many times have you always been told, I mean, I use it all the time when I go shopping, customer's always right. I mean, I use that all the time when I'm engaging, when I'm trying to buy something and I'm not getting the deal that I want to get. It's like, but the customer's always right. But in the workplace, when people experience racism from customers, their colleagues and managers are saying, you can't do anything about that, you can't talk about it, you can't challenge them. Customer's always right. For me, that's nonsense. We need to address it, and we need to address it quickly. Racism is not water off a duck's back. Why am I talking about that? To show the impact that racism has on people's physical and mental health. One of the things that we know is that the experience of racism at work leads to anxiety, it leads to stress, depression. In some cases, people have even, in the report, have even tried suicide. So the notion that a racist joke is just a harmless bit of fun, we're trying to address that to say, no, it has really, really significant impacts on the people on the receiving end of it. We made 4 films to accompany it, and these were like discussion pieces that we produced for the workplace, and the idea was to use the words from the people who took part in the survey and end the videos on a question so that the question could lead into a discussion. And I just want to share a quick video with you now. And basically, if you don't mind, if you can pay attention to the words that the people are using, because I'm going to ask you a question at the end.
If I had to describe racism in one word, it would be injustice.
Inequality.
Oppression.
Bullshit.
I would describe racism as fear.
Intolerance, unfair discrimination.
I would call it silencing.
Painful.
Dehumanising, unacceptable.
So if I just ask, thinking of the words that the other people used, how would you describe racism in one word? Intolerance. I heard intolerance for somewhere. Where did it come from? Was it yourself? I just heard the voice and I couldn't trace it because you're speaking to my bad ear on my right side. Sorry. Inequality, absolutely. Any other words? So this is that point about false paths that I was talking about and the different twists and turns. The people who took part in that film are volunteers, students and staff here at Manchester, and they shared their own experiences of racism. The filmmaker, we asked if people to come in, volunteer to take a quote off the wall and to read it, not word for word, but in their own, in a way that felt comfortable for them. If they didn't want to read a quote, would they mind sharing their own experiences? I wasn't expecting the filmmaker at the end to ask people, how would you describe racism in one word? So that original plan that I had was to create 2 5-minute videos. They became 6 1 to 2 minute videos. And one of the videos was something I can't claim the credit for, as much as I do, right? So, but this is used as a discussion piece because it's important in the workplace that we actually talk about what is racism. How do we define it? Paul Gent, the visual artist who did the graphic novels, was sitting behind the camera and he sketched everyone who who took part and produced this poster that's went up in workplaces around the country, and it describes what racism is. So what we did was we took the answers that people gave in the film and we added important insights. So we added things like structural. Racism is structure. The structure of society work to produce racial inequality. Racism is cultural. It's institutional. And they talk about, to try and flesh out and deepen our understanding of racism and use this as a discussion piece. I was working with young school people, people still at school getting ready to go to work. I showed them that video, and when one of the young guys, really cool young guy, got the poster that was at the side, and he was like, let's talk about the poster. So you went for the video hearing what other people said, the posing of the question, and then the poster became a discussion piece to explore it in more detail. And I know time's running out, and I don't want to eat into Alex's time. One of the things we also did was we created a project website. Why did we do that? It's because we got the funds to produce so many copies of the DVDs of all the films, the graphic novels and the posters that are here at the front. But we wanted it to have longevity beyond the project itself. So for example, one of the trade unions we worked with, they've downloaded each of the graphic novels. We've given them the rights to those, and they went away and printed them for their own purposes. So it's about having that genuine dialogue, giving up our, I suppose, artistic rights in a way that's about addressing the issues of inequality. Oh, we're getting fast now, and I don't know, I'm not making it any better by messing about with the slides. These are just some of the other activities we did. We did a blog piece that was really successful and gained a lot of traction and interest in the project, working with Policy at Manchester, so I'm pretty sure I don't need to talk about that, because Alex is going to talk about that, so move on. But they're just some of the other activities we did. The challenges of working with non-academic research partners. This is important. The university has got such conservative and strict ways about the way we've got to work. But the people that we often engage with, they don't work like that. They work to different rhythms, they have different resources, different procedures, and we need to be flexible, and it comes back to that issue of power. Do I go to those organisations and say, University of Manchester says we do it this way, it's this way or the highway, or do we find a way of compromise and working around it, finding solutions? The importance of planning and collaboration agreements, making sure that you're not doing all the work and that the people that you're working with will also contribute and help you out. But also explaining to the people you're working with that time's limited, we'll get limited budgets and limited administrative support. A number of times I had to say to people, this is just a part of my job, it's not the only thing I've got to do. And that can be quite difficult. But once you overcome that and people realise that, you have better working practices with one another. And the importance of compromise, not just in time, but also in terms of the political messages. So for example, in the reports and the graphic novels and the films, I personally don't like the term ethnic minority. I think it obscures more than it actually reveals. I prefer the term racialised because I think that is more descriptive and analytical. But the people that we worked with didn't like that term because it sounded too much like radicalised. So we had to compromise, and we went with BME, and I wasn't happy with BME. But in the spirit of getting the broader message across, I had to compromise. And finally, what is impact? And this is the struggle that I have in the university all the time. The number of times that something's downloaded or viewed, what does that mean? You know, our video was popular. So what? 25,000 people watched it. Well, when we put the videos up on YouTube on the first day, the university YouTube channel, we were subjected to horrendous racist, well, not me specifically because I'm white and I don't experience racism, but people were subjected, the videos were criticised by white people as being racist, and we faced all sorts of racist nonsense on the website. Does that count as impact? We helped racism. So I think we need to think critically about that. Measuring impact. So the university, when I had to write the funders report, was how many downloads did you get? How many views did you get? And I wanted to talk to them about how many members of staff came and spoke to me about how they experienced racism in this institution. How many students came and spoke to me? Can we start to talk about that? Because we can't just reduce it to numbers. The numbers tell us something, but there's stories behind those numbers, there's experiences, there's a human factor behind those numbers. And to me, how an institution makes us think and how it makes us feel, how it makes us interact with one another, that's important. 25,000 downloads. You never heard it from me, but I don't really care. But anyway. And also, are we measuring impact because it's a condition of research funding, or is it because we are committed to a public sociology and mutual education, or is it because we want to reflect on the use value of research and research practice? Why are we doing it, and for what purpose? I think they're key questions. And as I say, there's copies here for anybody who wants to take any of the copies of the materials away. Cheers.